Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events in crypto, Web3, and tech. It's Wednesday, June 5th. Let's take off. How's it going, guys? Sorry, it's been about a week since I've been able to record. I'm getting ready to get married here in the next couple of weeks, and there's just been a lot of stuff with work and the wedding. But the past week has certainly been very busy. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of pivotal events that have happened. And let's dive right into the first one. Biden vetoes resolution to overturn SEC's crypto custody guidance. This is absolutely a huge deal. This was a bipartisan effort from the Senate and from the House of Representatives here, where they both attempted and voted to repeal this unconstitutional law, which was SAB 121, that was put in place by the SEC. They decided that they were now the elected representatives and they were just going to make new laws, essentially. So it wasn't even really guidance. It makes it impossible for regulated entities to actually participate in custody. It forces them to treat crypto unlike any other asset on their books, where they basically have to personally own it instead of just using it. They have to essentially treat it as a personal, like their asset, as opposed to segregating it and keeping it as a customer's asset, right? Which is not something you have to do for any other asset class, right? They're able to custody stocks, custody bonds, custody, money, all sorts of different things. But for whatever reason, we're going to treat crypto completely differently, and basically makes it illegal and impossible to custody crypto for these entities, which you'd expect if you want to have compliance and laws and regulations that you want to keep an eye on. If you actually care about protecting the individual investor and protecting the individual, you want to have regulated entities that are participating in this custodialship, right? So it was a huge deal. The Biden administration, for whatever reason, threatened this veto, and they have followed through with it. And perhaps the most despicable part of the whole thing is they waited till it was Friday. It was late Friday that that he signed this veto and pushed this whole thing out. It's just very despicable, very dishonest. I hate to see it. It's par for the course. It wasn't completely unexpected, but bad for America. Sad day for America on this one. This is going to be very important for the election, right? So I know a lot of other podcasters who just have this cognitive dissonance, and sadly, this has become a bipartisan issue, and it's too bad, right? Now, that being said, there are tons of Democrats and many Democrats who have been pro innovation and pro technology, and we should support them, and I'm happy, and I will continue to support those politicians. This has become a bipartisan thing, and every single Republican is basically supporting cryptocurrency, and there's only a few Democrats who are supporting Web3, supporting innovation, supporting technology here. And this is just another example of it. This is another example of the SEC overstepping their bounds and the Biden administration backing that up. So sad day. I think this is going to cost Biden dearly in the election cycle upcoming. Let's move along to our next story. Nvidia is now more valuable than Apple at $3.01 trillion. So it looks like Nvidia has officially become the second most valuable company in the world. On Wednesday afternoon, the chip-making giant's market capitalization hit $3 trillion, putting it just ahead of Apple at $3 trillion. I think it's crazy how fast this thing is moving. We're up just absolutely another 5% today. I mean, there's so much capital flowing in here. And I think this is just, I still think we're early. I mean, I think the demand for chips and compute is going to just absolutely go parabolic. And I think people are just not ready for that. And many other companies will benefit, right? But Nvidia right now has the monopoly. They've got the keys to the kingdom. And so this is not unexpected. Another story I just kind of wanted to highlight, but here it says hackers drain millions from Binance accounts using Chrome plugins. If you are trading on exchanges and doing all these different things, just be aware of the things that you install on your computer. Here you can see there are little plugins at the top right corner of the screen. They ask for permission to different things and to do different things, right? So it's important that you pay attention to what you are installing on your computer. Keep an eye on it. Don't give permissions and access to these different extensions. If you're not using them, if you don't need them, delete them and revoke permission and access. So always be on your guard. And it's another reason not to keep all your funds in one place and to use cold storage and self-custody, not have hot wallets and giving these extensions access to your important funds. Next up, the crypto community shows Binance's CZ love as he begins his prison sentence. So it looks like CZ has finally checked in and he's starting his low security 4-month prison sentence. Sad day for the world. I think, someone like CZ should not be serving prison time. And I think that, this is unjust in my opinion, but that's my opinion. Spot Ether ETF approvals will take some time. The SEC chair spoke on CNBC on June 5th, suggesting the commission could delay approving S1 registration statements for exchange listing spot Ether ETFs. reading between the tea leaves and between the lines here, it looks like they're going to try to play more games here on the back end here. When he says it'll take some time, it looks like they're going to try to pull some shenanigans here, but I guess we'll see what happens. The courts might have to intervene and stop them again, but all they're really doing is preventing efficient markets and wasting taxpayer funds, right? Just continue to delay and create roadblocks and all sorts of other problems for the market, right? So again, at the end of the day, this is just sad to see. Reading the tea leaves here, it looks like he's going to try to delay this and slow roll and slow walk this even further. Largest Bitcoin mining firm sold 63% of mined Bitcoin in May. Marathon Digital sold a large chunk of its Bitcoin production in May as miners adjusted operations after the halving event. I think this is perfectly normal for different mining firms to sell. Obviously, the halving occurred, so you're getting half as much Bitcoin. 63% of that Bitcoin production is being sold. As far as I remember, I feel like Marathon has a large holding of Bitcoin that they just have on their balance sheet, right? So the fact that they had to sell 63% of their May production, they still were able to hold on to 37% of that Bitcoin production. They are expanding in different places. So there's different companies. It looks like Riot and CleanSpark, they produced tons of Bitcoin and they didn't really have to sell much or any of it at all, which is good for them. Miners are adjusting their operations after the last Bitcoin halving, which cuts rewards for mining Bitcoin in half every 210,000 blocks, or roughly every 4 years. So we know that the Bitcoin block reward, the block subsidy, the inflation went from 6.25 to 3.125. Here, they're doing a big, large expansion in a partnership with Kenya and also looking at Paraguay. So those expansions are expensive, right? You know, it costs a lot of money to build out these infrastructure and the mining sites. So and maybe they had to sell the cost to put some funds toward those things, especially if they're doing these things overseas. Next up, Coinbase CEO says company has donated $25 million to vote anti-crypto politicians out of Congress. The donation matches recent contributions from crypto payments company Ripple and tech-focused venture capitalist firm Andreessen Horowitz. You love to see this. Let's get some capital behind removing these roadblocks and these people that are just bad for America and bad for business in general. So with just 5 months to go until the 2024 U.S. elections, large crypto firms continue to bet big on crypto-friendly candidates who could help the $2 trillion digital asset industry achieve regulatory clarity. The U.S. biggest crypto exchange, Coinbase, announced a $25 million donation to the pro-crypto super PAC Fair Shake, matching recent contributions from crypto payments company Ripple and tech-focused venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. So it looks like Fair Shake's coffers are now up to $160 million, placing it in the top 5 largest super PACs this election cycle. I mean, that's pretty significant here, right? In the words of Brian himself, let's see what he says here. The best way to get regulatory clarity in democratic countries is to elect pro-crypto candidates on both sides of the aisle and to vote anti-crypto candidates out of office, said Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong in a blog post Monday morning, noting that crypto is a bipartisan issue affecting Democrats, Republicans, and independents. We now need to send a strong message in November by electing candidates who represent our values. I could not agree more. Coinbase has been a very vociferous advocate for fair crypto policy in Washington, D.C., lobbying for inclusive regulatory treatment. The industry feels it has been denied by Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler, who has brought enforcement actions against Coinbase itself and other industry giants like Ripple and Kraken. So nice to see this. It looks like the crypto lobby is moving into full effect here. And let's mobilize some capital and support pro-innovation, pro-business, and pro-technology candidates. MicroStrategy founder Michael Saylor to settle $40 million settlement in D.C. income tax case. The District of Columbia sued Taylor in 2022 for allegedly not paying income taxes while living in the district. I mean, I could not imagine why anybody would ever want to live in Washington, D.C. I mean, this is like another extortion scheme here. They got the highest crime. I mean, what are they doing with all this money? Where's all this money going? It's unbelievable what they're doing. The district sued Saylor. He disputes the allegations and said he settled to avoid the burdens of litigation. Makes perfect sense. Sometimes people just want to make these problems go away. You have so much money, you just don't want to deal with this, right? And he's basically claiming here that Florida remains my home today, and I continue to dispute the allegation that I was ever a resident of the District of Columbia. Saylor told the New York Times, I have agreed to settle this matter to avoid the continued burdens of the litigation on friends, family, and myself. So shares of the Tyson Corner, Virginia-based software developer, rose 3% in pre-market trading. So we are glad to have you in Florida, Michael Saylor. Let's move along to our X Factor takes. Here is Nick Carter, Jake Chervinsky. It looks like the 5th Circuit just vacated the SEC's private funds rule, holding that the SEC exceeded its statutory authority to regulate private fund advisors. The administrative state is out of control, and the federal judiciary is reining it in. Love to see it. So here Nick says, another L for Gensler, getting embarrassing at this point. And I think the context of this is important. I mean, this is where our tax dollars are just being so wasted with this nonsense. So Nick says, I'm biased, obviously, but the rule made no sense to me either. VCPE LPs are sophisticated. They don't need to be treated with kid gloves like they are retail investors, right? And I'll take it a step further. I mean, even retail investors, people need to learn. People need to accept some self accountability in this society. I mean, the fact that this is going on is just ridiculous. I mean, nobody has any personal accountability for anything anymore. If you make a bad investment, if you make a bad decision, you are responsible for your own life, right? So if you choose to buy GameStop stock, or you choose to buy a meme coin, or you choose to do whatever, that is your right, and you should be able to do whatever you want. And we don't need Daddy Gensler to come tell us what we can and can't do. I mean, the whole concept is absolutely asinine for adults who can vote, who can go to war. We don't need Daddy Gensler. We don't need him wasting all of our tax dollars to pursue these stupid cases and get censored and get fined by the judges, taxpayer money. Carisdale Capital. Today we launch a war against Bitcoin miners, an industry of snake oil salesmen that are incinerating both investor capital and the environment and should be banished from America, much like the Chinese RTO frauds that we helped kick out a decade ago. I mean, this is unfathomable that these clowns would say something like this. Good thing we live in America and say whatever you want. And sure enough, in the very next thing we figure out, we're short Riot, report available. So they are shorting. So it's very funny to see, what is going on here. Okay, well, you're shorting a Bitcoin mining stock. So to say that a business should be banished from America, I mean, a perfectly legal business. I mean, this is just unreal, but then they're shorting the company. So this whole thing is just a bunch of FUD, a bunch of nonsense. And I think that this Carisdale Capital is going to get absolutely wrecked when the markets rip. A lot of these miners are today profitable. And today, even after the halving, when Bitcoin price busts through all-time high here soon in the next year, as many of us think it will, it's not so easy just to double the electrical capacity of the world and build out twice as much mining operations really quickly, right? It's almost impossible to do that. And the silicon and the miners twice as much Bitcoin miners don't even exist right now, right? So you have to make the miners do all the stuff. So if the price of Bitcoin goes to 150,000, the profit margins of all these companies go up like 300 to 100% or more. There's a cost of electricity, and then they're profitable right now here. If the price of the asset if it doubles, it's not like all of a sudden you only make twice as much money, because the electricity cost doesn't double with it. The electricity cost stays here. You were already here. You go to here. So you're basically making 10 times or 4 times or 5 times, whatever it may be, what you were making previously, right? Because that electricity cost, your fixed cost, does not really increase. The value of the asset you're producing now has gone up. Interesting to see these shorts, but it is America and people can do whatever they want. I disagree with some of the opinions and stuff they have here, but this is worth a read if you want to hear a little bit of devil's advocate. Wall Street bets. The system is rigged. Posts is trading positions, market manipulation. And then here we go. We've got makes millions, insider trading, completely normal. God, I love this meme. FDIC warns that 63 lenders are on the brink of insolvency due to banks sitting on $517 billion in unrealized losses. And these unrealized losses, what may these be, you might ask? Well, I believe these unrealized losses are government bonds that are supposed to be AAA, safest thing you could possibly buy. But when they jacked interest rates and artificially manipulate, they go in their little chamber and they manipulate interest rates, not based on the market, but just based on whatever. The bonds that these entities are literally forced to hold as collateral are now devalued and worth less. So there's a lot of unrealized losses into the market. Brian Armstrong. Correct, in 2012, while trying to figure out what to name the company, I was cruising through the Bitcoin wiki looking for unique terms and came across this word. The .com had a buy it now price of $17.95, I believe. Checked the trademark availability on USPTO site and decided to pull the trigger. But if we move it up a little bit, there you see it, Coinbase right there. So that's where he got the idea to use Coinbase as the name of the company. And for my company, Consensus Protocol, I actually did something very similar. I was looking at the Bitcoin code and I saw consensus parameters. And what does it have to do with Bitcoin? And then I learned about this idea of a consensus protocol where you have all of these people all over the world. And it's the consensus of all of them, of the network, that moves the network along. It's called a consensus protocol. So Bitcoin itself is a consensus protocol. So I thought that was really cool. Next up, this is probably my favorite read that I want to read through, and I think it speaks to why privacy is important and why many of us feel that things like Bitcoin are important, and why freedoms are important, and why the Constitution is important. So here, DC Investor says, "Why do I believe in crypto? I grew up in a mostly analog world where privacy was still a very real thing. You could pay for something and no one would know what it was. You could drive somewhere and neither your car nor anyone else would know where you were. Almost all transactions were in physical cash. While phone calls were logged and some lines tapped, payphones still existed. Video and surveillance cameras started off as rare and recorded to film. Today, almost all transactions are via a third-party payment processor who preserves the data indefinitely. They could censor your ability to transact at a moment's notice. While encryption apps exist for audio communication, it's safe to assume some of these protocols are or will be hacked at some point. Video cameras are everywhere, and soon AI can be used by anyone to analyze all of the data en masse. And it is likely I will die in a surveillance society where it is possible for corporations and governments globally to know where you are and what you are doing at all times and stop you from doing anything they don't like. It's not a matter of, I have nothing to hide. It's the creation of a slippery slope which could allow any liberal democratic society to shift from free and open to complete totalitarian nightmare in the span of a year or less, given the infrastructure which now exists. I remember seeing an episode of the show West Wing 25 years ago, where they talked about how privacy would be one of the most important topics for the coming decades, with the show using it as the partial basis for selecting a Supreme Court justice in the first season. But it hasn't been. Privacy has been mostly a sideline topic, which society has mostly ignored as the infrastructure for total subversion of the individual has been built upon, then networked, and soon fed into AIs, which can already make mass surveillance completely trivial. It's wild how much and how fast things have changed during this time, and how the next 20 years may change things far more than we've already seen. I'm not optimistic about privacy. I don't believe most people grow up caring about it anymore. I think most people are happy to sell their data for a pittance. As a society, we tend to jail people who create technology which creates privacy to fight back against the technology which we created to destroy it in the first place. And I definitely don't trust the new wave of AI-first corporations stepping into the arena and prominently into our lives with how they will manage our right to privacy. Crypto could end up as one of the very few checks and balances in a world like that. On some, though not all of these dynamics. I don't know if it will, but it's worth trying. Wow, that's a powerful piece from IMDC Investor there, and I agree with many of the points there that he has there. But I am bullish on privacy, and I think it's important we fight for our right to our privacy. And remember, privacy is the ability to selectively reveal yourself to the world, right? For any of you who haven't read the Cypherpunks Manifesto, highly recommend going to give it a read. It's probably one of the most foundational documents I've ever read when it comes to how privacy is necessary in a digital age because of all the things here that he's describing. Altcoin Daily, Chamath Palihapitiya explains how one Bitcoin could reach over 500K per coin by October 2025. This episode of the All In podcast was an absolute banger this past week, so highly recommend anybody who hasn't listened to it. It's pretty long, but it's well worth listen. They touched on a lot of things that I thought were fantastic, not just about Bitcoin, but about a lot of different topics, right? So here he's talking about how after the halving, after the market digests and adjusts itself to the new reality of supply, right? And there's a lot of supply that miners have and that different entities have, especially miners, right, for operations, that they will slowly sell over time. And you'll get to this point at a couple of months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months after the halving, where that supply, that residual supply is just completely wiped out. And then you have a new price discovery reality that occurs, right? And this has sort of played out every cycle. We don't know if it will play out. Obviously the past does not predict the future, but there is a historical precedent here for that thing. And if you think about it logically and you think about it from an economics perspective and supply and demand perspective, it makes perfect sense. Eric Voorhees, that suggestion of the sanctity of the individual and her freedom from the institutionalized coercion was America's gift to the world. No other country has ever expressed it with resolute commitment. That is why the fight will end here. Wow, what an absolutely phenomenal speech from Eric Voorhees at the Coin Center Gala. For those of you who haven't listen to it. I highly recommend giving it a listen, and it just falls right in line with everything else we've been talking about this episode. The sanctity of the individual, the constitutional rights and freedom, those things are so important, and that is what separates America from the world. And I think many in society have lost sight of those things in the current century we're in. But these are the founding principles of America. This is what America stands for. We've got judges in New York, the state of New York, who say that the Second Amendment and the Constitution doesn't exist in their courtrooms. I mean, they say that out loud. I don't know how they still have licenses in law and they're still able to practice. It just doesn't make sense to me. You swear an oath to the Constitution when you're a judge, so I don't understand how you can say that the Constitution doesn't exist. I mean, they should be immediately disbarred from if they can't uphold the Constitution. We need to get back to our founding and our foundational principles that made America what it is today. Here is Ryan Selkis talking about that. Not unexpected, but Eric Voorhees' speech at the Coin Center Gala was brilliant. I hope it's posted soon. Crypto's fight is a fight for America's values, and it's a glorious one. Proud to have worked with patriots like Eric who have been committed to the mission for a decade. Could not agree more here. I think Ryan captures the ethos of everything. If Twitter was still in Bolshevik hands, the republic already would have fallen. Elon Musk saved our right to free speech, digital assembly, and our ability to petition the government with our grievances peacefully. The X acquisition presented civil war. I think this is a nice analysis, and I think it's very accurate. Faryar Shirzad, I believe he works for Coinbase, and he is the chief policy officer, an immigrant who loves America. The president was not served well by his team. He is using his extraordinary veto power to protect a sneaky bureaucratic move by the SEC Gov chair to hide behind his staff to destabilize an entire industry. If SAB 121 were a formally ratified agency rule, it would be one thing. But for the White House to prepare a veto statement that puts the president in the position of defending the considered views of an agency staff that were never lawfully considered by the commission itself against significant bipartisan majorities in both houses of Congress is a disservice to Joe Biden and the office of the president. And at the end of the day, the buck stops with Joe Biden, right? If he's really in control, if he's really his own man, if he can really make his own decisions as the president, then it's his job to be educated on these issues and to learn about them. He's the president of the United States, right? So the buck stops with him, and this falls back on him. He put these positions. He made the deal with Elizabeth Warren to get his nomination, and he allowed her to have wreak havoc and psycho control over all of the things she's been doing behind the scenes to attack innovation and attack progress, and attack jobs and attack industry. So, these are you reap the seeds you sow, right? He put these people in place to do these things, and he's backing up these terrible decisions, right? So, sad day for America. Caitlin Long. Breaking, Donald Trump becomes first American president to accept Bitcoin Lightning payments for campaign donations. Love to see it. And you can now see the stark and clear difference between the two candidates as we move forward. Choice is very obvious, right? So, we've got one candidate launching NFTs and accepting Lightning Network payments. We've got another candidate who's doesn't even know what crypto is and is signing bipartisan vetoes from both chambers of Congress to protect a authoritarian clown who's running the SEC into the ground, losing in court, wasting taxpayer money, and literally attacking the industry and probably causing trillions of dollars to flee offshore, of future tax revenue, of future wealth, of future business. So I think the choice is very clear, right? So here's Nick Carter following up on that. Rest in peace. Dems are just as good on Crypto Talking Point. Born May 2024, died May 2024. Classic. PaulGrewal.eth. What Brian Brooks, U.S. proposed in his Fair Access Rule prohibiting federally chartered banks from denying financial services on political or ideological grounds was good policy. After today's SCT ruling in Vulo, affirming that financial regulators can't coerce preferred political or ideological activity, it's also good insurance against a flood of lawsuits. When Brian Brooks and the Trump administration was in office, they made a rule that was just called fair access, right? It says you as a public servant, if an entity is legal, you treat them the same. You don't use your access to being a regulator to make up new laws. That's not your job. Your job is to simply enforce, and it's really not your job to go behind the scenes and do all the sneaky stuff that Choke Point Marty is doing, Marty Gruenberg from the Obama administration and now in the Biden administration. He's attacking industries behind the scenes that they just don't like, right? That goes against their political views, right? Well, that is not your job as a regulator to do, and it absolutely should be illegal. You should follow the law. And when you go to court in the Supreme Court the court tells you what you're doing is unconstitutional, you shouldn't get back in power after in the next Biden administration and do the same thing that you were doing, right? There needs to be accountability there for Mr. Marty Gruenberg and for these choke point clowns. This is not your job. Your job is to follow the law, and you don't make the law, right? Like SAB 121, you don't make laws. That is not your job. Your job is to interpret the laws and apply the laws, right? And enforce the laws that have been made by Congress and by the Senate. But the problem is we've got authoritarians in power. When they have power, they abuse it, right? Perfect example of with all this COVID stuff and this Fauci stuff that's going on, very same thing, right? Abusing your power, manipulating, trying to stop people from doing. I mean, the evidence and testimony that's coming out after listening to the All In Pod is unbelievable. If you have not listened to the latest All In Pod episode, you have to go and listen to it. I mean, it's unfathomable what these guys are doing. These swamp creatures are teaching these public servants how to avoid FOIA requests and freedom of information access requests from the public, right? They're supposed to work for the public. They're on the taxpayer dime, and they're actively subverting what should occur, and completely unethical. They need to be made an example of. They need to be held accountable. Alex Gladstein. The crazy part is that an open source, unstoppable decentralized currency has performed as well over 10 years as the world's most successful company. The even crazier part is that unlike Nvidia, anyone could access Bitcoin, no ID or paperwork or particular nationality required. Right? Over the past decade, Nvidia and Bitcoin have been step in step. Bitcoin is the best performing asset in all of human history, right? If you go back to 2014, then yes, it's performed just as well as the best performing stock in all of human history. But if you go back to the inception, Bitcoin outperforms. But it is a cool chart to look to match them up to each other, to see the exponential and Metcalfe's law and these different dynamics that most individuals aren't really able to appreciate just yet. To understand network effects and understand exponential growth is a hard concept for the human brain to grasp. Here's another post from DC Investor. I've been in crypto for 10 plus years, and sometimes I wonder how much further can some can possibly coast down the slope of total nihilism and where that will ultimately lead us. Go far enough in every permissible use case, and any form of adoption can be claimed as legitimate and even virtuous, even if it's toxic garbage, which will make the entire space look absolutely horrific to public perception in a matter of months. Just because it's possible doesn't make it good, nor does it mean that you need to explicitly promote it or enable it, and then claim it is gainful adoption, which is moving the space forward. Often, it does the exact opposite. Collectively, it feels like we've learned almost nothing since last cycle's waves of scammers. If anything, people seem to think they should lean harder into them because the mindset is now, well, someone's got to make the money, so it might as well be me. And again, you're making heroes out of those who do it straight to your face. Not going to lie, it feels a bit depressing. Do I necessarily agree with it? Yes, I agree with parts of it. I agree that a lot of these clowns and these Ponzi schemers and all of these different people, doing these pump and dump schemes and all sorts of stuff, even in penny stocks and stock markets, am I disgusted by those people? Absolutely. Do I want to participate in that stuff? I don't really think that it provides any value to society. As long as there's disclosure there and people know what they're getting themselves into, there's not misrepresentations, right? If people want to buy a picture of a dog or a picture of a cat and call it, kitty cat coin or whatever, and they want to, participate in a pump, it's like gambling. It's like, do I think people should be able to go to the casino and bet a hand of blackjack? Sure. Should you be able to play craps and roulette and poker, or any of these other things? Should people be allowed to play, chess and play games and bet money? Sure. I believe people should be able to do whatever they want to do, right? So do I support these Ponzi's and these things? No, I personally don't support them. Do I think people should have the right to do what they want? Absolutely, right? Do what you want. If it makes you happy, do it. I don't have to endorse it. I don't have to like it. It's a free society. And as long as you know what you're getting yourself into, as long as you're buying a picture of a cat and you're hoping that it's going to go up, I mean, there's really no fundamental value there. You should be responsible for your, successes or results or, failures, right? That's on you. Balaji here. The Fed now, he always got some great content, right? So the Fed now admits some countries are moving to gold, but says it's a small group. China, India, Russia, Turkey. China and India, some of the fastest growing countries over the past couple decades. That small group represents 3 billion people, so almost 40% of the world is moving away from dollars towards gold. The data on estimated portfolio shares show a mix of both positive and negative changes in US dollar asset portfolio shares across countries. Here it says the decline in the dollar preferences of a small group of countries, notably China, India, Russia, and Turkey. So this is the way that the New York Fed tries to spin this whole thing. And at the end of the day, 40% of the world is moving their reserves into a hard currency, right, that cannot be printed. This is a significant chunk of the world, right? 40% of the world is a massive amount of the world. So what should the U.S. do? Game theoretically, they should adopt the Bitcoin standard. They should start owning Bitcoin on the Treasury Reserve as part of the Treasury Reserves, right? And they should stop making the dollar political, right? If you want to stay the global reserve currency, quit stealing other countries' funds when you don't like what they're doing, just because you disagree with what they're doing, and that's just the way the world works, right? Money cannot be a political, and it should not be a political thing. In my opinion, Bitcoin is this money that anybody in the world can use, right? Because if you have the ability to censor and abuse and do these things, eventually they're going to be censored and abused, right? And it cuts out the majority of people and impoverished people, not just dictators or whoever. It cuts out the millions and billions of impoverished people who could benefit from a permissionless money like Bitcoin, or even a permissionless version of the US dollar, right? A stable coin that will allow them to protect their purchasing power better than their local currencies, right? 40% of the countries in the world are moving their reserves away from the US dollar. And next up, another post from Ryan Selkis. Good morning, Joe Biden. Thank you for the last week. Convicting political rivals, greenlighting U.S. attacks on Russia, dropping 350,000 illegal immigrant cases, ignoring SCOTUS student loan ruling, attempting to ban crypto, Banana Republic shit from an incompetent cadaver-in-chief. His opinion, not mine, although I certainly agree with some parts of this, right? So this whole idea of, he had some post about convicting his chief political opponent, about saying we respect the rule of law, and literally like a post before that was like, I'm not going to follow the Supreme Court ruling on student loans. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, the cognitive dissonance, obviously he's barely alive. He's eating ice cream cones or whatever, but whoever's running his Twitter account is doing those posts, and it's like the cognitive dissonance is unbelievable, and especially after attacking our industry with this SAB 121 repeal, the bipartisan attempt. There's probably about a 30% chance, in my opinion, that we're going to see another candidate for the Democratic Party. Looking at most of the Vegas betting odds, he's down by about 16 points against Trump. Trump is a 16, 17 percentage point favorite, I believe, on the betting odds, which is the largest it's been in the past 3 to 4 years. He can't really get much worse for him right now, politically and polling wise, right? He's lost the crypto vote. Things are not looking good. The third in command at the Department of Justice went to prosecute some case against his chief political opponent and help this brag guy in New York. I wouldn't give a damn dollar to New York. I will never do business there. He made some ridiculous goal. They actually voided the contract that was written and signed and agreed to by everybody. It's unfathomable. So some of these places where they're just authoritarians, you just cannot do business there. It just doesn't make sense. The taxes are through the roof. There's record waves of crime, corruption, massive, problems with the upcoming debates. I think it's a win-win situation for Joe Biden and the Democrats. He's polling at record lows. It can't get much worse, right? So if he somehow does good in debates and he surprises to the upside, you can keep him as a candidate. If his dementia shows and he does worse, you already have this thing in your back pocket where you can replace him and put up a different candidate, right? You can use the convention and just decide on a different candidate, right? Like has been done in the past, right? This is not a thing that's never been done before. There is a playbook for this, right? So you have a chance to let him do the first debate. If it gets destroyed and it gets worse, or he has a problem with his cognitive display, stuttering, can't figure, and the American people can see that even more clearly than they've already seen it, with him falling off bikes and falling down the stairs and all these different things, and short circuiting in public. If you see that, then I think they're going to probably pull the old switcheroo. Let's see. But, again, this is just total speculation by me. Justin, Australia's first spot Bitcoin ETF go live tomorrow. This was a couple days ago. Are you prepared? So it shows that more and more countries are adding ETFs and more financial systems are integrating Bitcoin. And finally, for the day, I'll leave you guys with this from Rothmus. If you think Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, just wait till you find out how much it costs to secure fiat. Stay safe, stay blessed, never stop learning, and keep an open mind. Have a good one, guys. Thanks.